Imagine waking up every day to the sound of waves and the warm sun hitting your face, where every day feels like a vacation, yet it has all of the comforts of home. Hey, what's going on? My name is Andrew with the Emerald Group at LPT Realty and your original Life on the Emerald Coast team. I've had the pleasure of helping over 1,100 people, just like you, move to the Emerald Coast. Today I'm going to be sharing the 8 must-know things about Gulf Breeze, Florida, which is the Emerald Coast's hidden gem. By the end of this video, you will know exactly whether or not Gulf Breeze is the perfect place for you. All right, picture this. A couple with 2 young children are thinking of moving here to the Emerald Coast. They want to get away from all of the hustle and bustle of the heavy traffic that you see in Atlanta, Georgia. They want a little bit more of a peaceful, laid-back environment, but still one that hits all of their wants and needs because, well, they're going to be picking up and moving their entire family here. They want to make sure it's the perfect place. Now, they knew they wanted to move to Florida, but they didn't know exactly where, and they happened to find us just like you did here on YouTube. After watching our channel and other channels here along the Emerald Coast showcasing off everything, they ultimately decided to give us a call, and we went through a buyer consultation. And what we found there were 5 kind of must-haves, or at least very strong wants that they had in their next property and the next area that they're living in general, which we ultimately ended up pinpointing was Gulf Breeze. And in today's video, we're going to kind of walk through what those 5 things were, and then I'm going to add on 3 others that weren't necessarily important to them, but is going to be very important to most people watching this video. So don't miss out on those last 3. The first 5 are real accounts from somebody that moved from Atlanta to here, so let's get into those. The very first thing that was super important to them was getting rid of the traffic. They are tired of the Atlanta traffic. It's taking hours to get home from work. They lived in suburbs right outside of the city, and they were absolutely done with it. They have been putting up with this for 10 years, every single year, getting worse and worse and worse. That was number 1 on their list, which was super easy for us because we don't have that kind of traffic anywhere along the Emerald Coast. So that opened up every single city, but it was just the start of the conversation. After digging a little bit further, we found a couple other items along this same idea, I guess, of traffic that I would call traffic and accessibility. They still wanted the option to be close to all big city amenities, but without all of the other stuff of the big city, the traffic, the crime, all of that great stuff. So first and foremost, I'm not saying that Gulf Breeze doesn't have traffic. It 100% does. And there are certain times where it's a little bit more painful to get around, especially if you're commuting into and out of Pensacola. For those that don't know where Gulf Breeze is located, we'll put up a nice little map of it. It is directly southeast of Pensacola, located right between Pensacola and Pensacola Beach, which is the barrier island just south of Gulf Breeze. Now, when we're talking about Gulf Breeze today, just so you're aware, we're going all the way over into Navarre. So we're including Tiger Point and Midway as well. But Gulf Breeze proper is what most people know it as, but it also extends a little bit further east. So if you are coming in and out of Pensacola, maybe you're commuting for work or you're going out there for the dining and great restaurants, great shopping, whatever it is you're going in and out for during standard rush hour traffic early in the morning, late in the afternoon, it is typically going to be a little bit more busy. Particularly if you are headed with the flow of traffic. Obviously, if you're going into Pensacola in the morning, maybe commuting for work and commuting back for work, you're going to hit that rush hour traffic unless you stay a little bit later or leave earlier. A lot of it just kind of depends on the timing of your job. And then, of course, we have tourists out here. Pensacola Beach is located right between there. So people that are staying in Pensacola and headed down to Pensacola Beach, or vice versa, staying in Pensacola Beach and going into Pensacola, Maine for all of their, amenities and things like that, they are crossing through all of this. And that means there's seasonal traffic. Whenever our vacation season hits, which for the most part is June, July, and August, although those aren't the only times, those are just the most heightened times, then the traffic is just a little bit worse. But in comparison to Atlanta, this was absolutely nothing. When this couple flew down to kind of check it out, they were pleasantly surprised when they came down in July and found, there's definitely traffic, but it wasn't anything near what they were used to. So that checked off one big thing on their list. Now, one thing that they didn't really mention, but I want to make sure I mention it to you, is that there's always something going on when it comes to fixing up the roads and such out here. With all of the, economy-driven stuff from the tourism that we have out here, it means we've got a good amount of money to make sure our roads are good and all of this, but that comes with one big downfall, which is they're always doing construction on something. In fact, when they were doing construction on the bridge that goes from Gulf Breeze into Pensacola, it seemed like it was mayhem if you were to just look at the Facebook forums and groups and things like that. But in reality, it was just a little bit more painful. We took the toll road up and went around, so it wasn't the end of the world. But some people, well, you would think it was, but that's just, the internet at its best. So if you are worried about that portion, but you're still like, hey, maybe Gulf Breeze is still for me, which, by the way, there's 7 other things you must know that you can't miss out on. I'm probably starting with the one that is going to deter the most amount of people, but it's really all not that bad, especially if you can kind of dodge the main commuting time. So going a little bit earlier in the morning, or maybe mid-afternoon, or even in the evenings, you're generally going to dodge all of this. You're not going to notice any difference. In fact, it is super rare that I'm on that bridge and I hit traffic. And it's not because I'm trying to dodge it. It's because it really is only during a very specific amount of time, generally about an hour or 2 in the morning and an hour or 2 in the afternoon. After that, for the most part, it's pretty easy to get in and out of Pensacola or in and out of Gulf Breeze. Of course, if you happen to wake up in the morning or be headed your way back home and you realize the GPS says it's way longer because there happens to be an accident or something like that, you do have the Garcon Point Bridge that you can go around. So that is a little bit further east into town. This is particularly beneficial if maybe you're going into the northeastern portion of Pensacola or coming from the northeastern portion, because honestly, it's about the same commute either way. The big drawback, however, is this is a toll bridge, so that means you will have to pay money to cross it. But if it saves you an hour of your life, I'll gladly spend the couple of bucks personally. At the end of the day, when we're talking to different locals that live in Gulf Breeze and have to deal with this commuting, they're not all that worried about it. The kind of consensus that I got from a lot of our past clients that live out there is like, hey, yes, sometimes our 20-minute commute is now 30 minutes. It's not that big of a deal, especially to have this small town feel with all of the amenities right next door and not having to deal with that traffic all the time, just only when I'm going into Pensacola, which I think is a pretty good thing. And then, of course, those of you that might be working remotely or retirees, this is probably not going to be a problem at all. All right, headed back to our family that was moving from Atlanta. The second thing that was really important to them was the community vibe in general. They wanted a very similar community to what they had. See, they lived in the suburbs of Atlanta in a great little community that had these block parties and neighborhood garage sales, the kind where the neighbors just all kind of got to know each other. There were kids playing in the street. They were waving at each other when you came in from a long day of work, and they didn't want to lose out on that type of community. Now, the thing with this is all of these things are very specific to the neighborhood itself, not necessarily the city. But luckily, Gulf Breeze has this all over the place. As we were talking to them and I'm going over neighborhoods in my head, thinking which neighborhoods might be best for them, there were a few that came to mind instantly. And this is without doing a ton of research, just from all of the people we've helped sell in the past. One of those is Grand Point neighborhood, a great fun little neighborhood that's located kind of right outside of Pensacola, just outside of Gulf Breeze proper. Fun little community with a very short commute to get in and out of Pensacola. Another one that popped in my head was Villa or Via Venice, okay? And Venice is spelled F-E-N-Y-C-E, which I think is kind of cool. This is a great little canal community. It's got some canal options, and it is just flooded, no pun intended, with pool homes all over the place. So kind of gives the kids something to do without actually having to be out in the neighborhood, but the neighborhood is very safe and family friendly in general, and it kind of gives that same vibe of the neighbors waving and things like that. And then, of course, there's neighborhoods like Whisper Breeze, which is a more established neighborhoods with big, beautiful, mature trees and a very friendly atmosphere all in all that has lots of options from waterfront on the Sound and waterfront on the canal, as well as just standard single-family homes. It's actually funny, I'm not going to mention which neighborhood they ended up choosing in, but they did send me a text message right after we had closed, right when they were moving in, and I am going to read that for you right here. We are getting all settled in, and you wouldn't believe it, but the kids have already made friends. One of the neighbors came by to introduce themselves and said they noticed the ages of our kids, and they said they had a son and daughter around the same age. They're outside right now playing as the movers are bringing in stuff into the house. Thanks again. So they ended up hitting exactly what they wanted. I actually just spoke to them. They moved in. This is probably about a year and a half ago. I spoke to them just a couple of weeks ago as preparation for this video to kind of get an updated idea on what they felt about their neighborhood. Their only complaint was that they're a little bit further from Pensacola than what they originally wanted. But other than that, they absolutely love it. And those same two children that were 3 or 4 houses down, they're still friends with them today, which I think is just kind of like a nice little beautiful touch to the whole thing. They absolutely love the neighborhood we're in. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later because there's a couple of other correlations that we're going to make between this and new construction neighborhoods and things like that. But you'll have to wait on that just a second as we transition into our third thing that you must know before moving to Gulf Breeze. The third most important thing to them was schools and education. As you saw, they dearly love their kids and they want the absolute best for them. And so when they were transitioning from Atlanta down here, they weren't super impressed with the schools in Atlanta in general. They heard the Florida schools are very good. I've seen different rankings all over. I don't know if I necessarily believe all of them. Like I was just looking at usnews.com. They said that Florida ranked number 1 2 times in a row for the best schools in the entire country. Again, I'm not sure how much I believe that because I bet I could do that with every state in the country. And I bet every single one of them have some sort of ranking that they're ranking number 1 on. But what I do know is that the Florida school system is outstanding. If they're not in the top 10 in the country, I would legitimately be very surprised. And Gulf Breeze is very high in Florida's list, which makes them a great area for schools and education. In fact, when we're looking at the public school system, which I'll talk about non-public, I'll talk about private, I'm even going to talk about some homeschooling options here in just a moment. But when we're looking at just the public, the high school, the middle school, and the elementary school, all 3 of them rated, 2 of them rated in A, that's the elementary and the high school, and the middle school rated in A-. These are very strict standards. This is all according to niche.com, so these are not my ratings, this is not my personal opinion. I don't have kids in those schools, but I know that there are certain cities along the Emerald Coast that when somebody says, I want the best of the schools, I think of generally 3 to 4 areas. I think of Niceville, Gulf Breeze, Santa Rosa Beach, and Navarre. All 4 of those, their school systems are great. And Navarre is a new addition. That wasn't always on my top 5 list or top 3, top 4 list, whatever this, I guess it was 4 for me. But they are rising very quickly. And it's just the amount of good things I hear about those schools is very high. So going back to niche.com, you can go on there, type in Gulf Breeze. It'll give you all these stats. I chose one stat from each of them that I thought was very interesting and what might be important to me. So for the first one, number 66 in the entire state of Florida for the high school, best high school for athletes. This would be very important to me because I played a lot of sports in high school, and I know that my children probably would too. So that would be super high on my list. Now, I've got other kind of accolades to talk about here as well for the high school, but this is the big stat that I picked out because number 66 out of the, I don't know how many thousands of schools there are, seems to be very, very good to me. And then the middle school ranked number 136 in the entire Florida system for best public middle school, which again, there's probably 2,000 plus schools. That seems like an outstanding accolade to me to be able to make that in a state with such a good track record for schools. And then lastly, our public elementary school got number 98 for best public elementary school in the state of Florida as well. So a lot of outstanding accolades that show that, hey, Gulf Breeze isn't messing around. Education is super important to them. And for such a small town, I think Gulf Breeze proper is technically like 6,000 people. It's not a whole lot. It is a very small town in the grand scheme of things. For them to have such strong school ranking systems is just beyond belief to me. Now, I want to talk about some of the extracurriculars and things like that as well. So that's what we're going to kind of go into. And forgive me if you see my eyes jumping back down. I'm looking at my notes from time to time because this isn't something I have memorized. I do have to research all of this stuff because I don't personally have kids in these school systems, but I do have a lot of clients in them. So when we're talking about extracurricular activities, the Gulf Breeze High School in particular for sports is a very, very good option. They rank very competitive for football, soccer, baseball, and a few other sports, including what they call, team spirit or fostering team spirit in of itself. And then, of course, for those of you that have kids that are interested in the arts, they rank very well in programs in visual arts, theater, music, and award-winning bands and choir groups. And lastly, for those of you that have kids that might be interested in science, I guess the new science term is STEM, S-T-E-M, which has been kind of, getting really, really popular the last few years. But they've got robotics clubs, coding classes, science fairs that give students a chance to engage in hands-on learning and things like that. So whether it's sports, arts, or science, all of it is covered in these school systems. Now, what if you do not want to be in public schools? You want to be private or homeschooled? Let's talk about those, starting with private schools. Gulf Breeze has options for private schools both directly inside of Gulf Breeze as well as the surrounding areas in Pensacola and Navarre. A couple of examples are Christian-based schools that focus on specialized curriculums that include things like Montessori and STEM-intensive programs. The really cool thing about the private schools here in the Gulf Breeze and surrounding areas is that one of the big things that they focus on are small classroom sizes, so they can give a lot more individualized attention, which I think helps kind of maneuver into a great school system. I actually personally believe that that is why the public school systems do so well, is because they're such smaller classrooms, because Gulf Breeze is just a smaller city in general. So instead of having 30, 40, 50 people, I would venture to bet that it is a lot less. Although now that I'm thinking about it, I could have done that research before this video. So if I think about it, I'll throw up how many people are in each class in the public school system out here, because I know that's something we can research. All right, now let's pivot into one of my favorite things when it comes to education, and that's homeschooling. And I say it's one of my favorites because there are multiple girls here on my team that have their children homeschooled, so it's near and dear to them, which in turn kind of makes it near and dear to me as well. Gulf Breeze and Florida in general is very supportive of homeschooling in a lot of facets. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they're one of the states that are leading the way on it, because it is very important to us here in Florida to have these options. So you can find a lot of co-op groups, shared teaching resources, and extracurricular activities that you can take your kids to so that they're actually getting, connection with other people and not just learning from you. They're actually going out there and building skills with other people, building teamwork skills and group skills and things like that. So there are some pretty cool options for that. And there are also other outside learning opportunities like field trips to the Gulf Islands, National Seashore, and other local, nature perks, and going to go check out like the turtle rehabilitation museum or whatever it is over there in Navarre. I'm sure I butchered that name. Forgive me, because I'm kind of doing this off the spot here. But there are a lot of opportunities to get them out of the house, and again, with other people or even with you, and have some of these learning opportunities, particularly about the marine biology here in our local area. And then, of course, some of the history and things like that. All right, coming back to our family that was moving from Atlanta coming down here, the fourth thing on their list was location. They were really worried that where they were at now, even though the suburbs and the surrounding area of Atlanta, it took them an hour to get into the city, they still had great options to see sports and great dining and nightlife and just things to do in general. Now, it was a little bit of a commute, but they didn't want to lose that completely. So this is another reason why we thought that Gulf Breeze might be a pretty good option for them, because you've got Pensacola literally right there. So depending on where you're living in Gulf Breeze, and for purposes of this video, we're including Midway and Tiger Point, as I mentioned before, which goes all the way to the west edge of Navarre. So we'll throw up a quick map so you can kind of see it. Depending on where you're at in that area, getting into Pensacola is going to take anywhere from about 12 minutes to 24 minutes. Now, this is, of course, if there's no traffic. This could essentially double at its worst if traffic is really bad, if there's an accident or you're going during peak times during peak tourist season. And the really cool thing is that a lot of the great dining is right there near the Palafox, like downtown area of Pensacola. So it's essentially right when you get off the bridge. Like you get off the bridge, you head a quick right, and you're right there. And you've got places like McGuire's, Five Sisters, the Orr House, the Fish House, and a lot of other great dining options. Those are just a few that are some of my favorites. And they also have a great Brazilian steakhouse. I cannot think of the name. It literally just popped up in my head. It's one of those like all you can eat meat places. They just walk around and just keep shoving meat on your plate. That one's also pretty good as well. And all of this is located right there as soon as you get off the bridge, so you're not having to head that far into Pensacola. A lot of the commute time is if you're really scattered all throughout Pensacola, you're going to the north side, you're going to the west side, something like that. That's where most of the time is taken up. But just going from Gulf Breeze, jumping right on Highway 98, and then going across the bridge, well, that part is pretty quick. Now, for those of you looking for nightlife or a place to go grab a drink or something like that, well, Pensacola's got you covered there too. So over in Palafox, the number one place that I think of when I think of like dance club kind of like nightlife vibe is a Civil Quarter. And this is like 7 different things in one, from a dance hall to a pool hall to, dining and things like that. Of course, if you want something a little bit more relaxed, we've got a couple of options for you. The first one is just my personal favorite out here in Pensacola, and that's the Old Hickory Whiskey Bar. You've got 650 plus different types of whiskeys as well as cocktails. It's a full bar, obviously, but it is primarily centered around the whiskey. The whole theme is whiskey, kind of like fancier a little bit. Drinks are a little bit more expensive there than you might see over in Civil Quarter, but it's still a really great place to go. And then, of course, if you're more a wine person, well, we've got a great wine bar. And you would not believe this, but the actual name is The Wine Bar. So that could be a great option in that same area. Now, those weren't the only things on our client's list that they were looking for. They also wanted to be close to an airport and close to the water. Well, the water was easy. You've got water on both sides of Gulf Breeze. And again, depending on where you're at, it will take anywhere from about 5 to 15 minutes to get to either Pensacola Beach, or if you're just looking for water in general, to either get to the Sound or get to, the Gulf side, the beach side, it could be anywhere from about 5 to 10 minutes as well. And I know that there might be some of y'all thinking, why would I even care about the Sound when the beach is over here? That's what you guys are known for, is your beautiful beaches. There are some pretty good benefits of going into the Sound or maybe even into more calmer waters. First and foremost, for the calmer waters, right? If you don't want to be thrashing around, you actually want to be on the water, you want to take your stand-up paddleboard or something like that, the Sound is going to be a lot better of an option than the Gulf. Although the Gulf is a good option too, it's just, you're probably going to need a little bit more experience, particularly if you're on a stand-up paddleboard or a kayak or something like that. It's probably going to be a little bit more enjoyable in the calmer waters. And lastly, the airports. So one of the big things here was they had access to the Atlanta airport, obviously, which is international travel. So they wanted to be close to that as well. They had family all over the country. So lucky for them, the Pensacola airport was just 20 minutes away. And no matter where you're at in Gulf Breeze, it will be 20 minutes or less, pending traffic, of course. So number 5 on our clients list that was headed from Atlanta down here, going back to them. And before we go into the 3 that I think are important, this is the last one that was important to them, and that was the real estate market. They wanted to stay underneath a budget of $450,000. Realistically, they wanted under $400,000. $450 was like, man, we really got to fall in love with that house at $450,000. They also wanted the option to have a newer construction or even a brand new construction home, because the suburb that they had lived in was an older, like a more established neighborhood, like mostly 70s and 80s homes. And it just seemed like every weekend, the husband was just constantly doing projects, keeping up with the house. So they wanted to find all of that, still be close to the beach, and all of the other things we've already talked about. So you would think this would actually be kind of a difficult position to put us in as real estate professionals, but honestly, it was pretty easy. So quick spoiler alert, to kind of wrap all of this together, we were able to find them brand new construction, never been lived in a community that hit everything they wanted. And I already read you the text message that they sent to me well over a year ago, and they absolutely love everything about it. Again, the only thing that they were like, hey, the only thing we wish is that Pensacola was a little bit closer. But that is because they chose pretty far east in Gulf Breeze in of itself. And the best part about all of this is they got some freaking incredible incentives, getting all of their closing costs paid for, getting a great interest rate, getting, a fridge. They didn't get a fence. That was, I think, the only thing, if my memory serves me. I could even be wrong on that because, again, it has been a year and a half since they purchased. But they got a lot of great things inside of this new construction home. And the crazy part is they didn't spend an arm and a leg. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised on the prices here in the area. But before I go break those down, when we were searching, I did a very similar search today before shooting this video to see how many options you would have in the same kind of parameters that they had. And there were 11 brand new construction homes underneath 400K as of today. And that's not to mention the 24 or so that are not on the market officially or not on Zillow, or you can't find it online anywhere. You actually need to know a real estate professional that works with them day in and day out that aren't even there. So you've got, 30 plus opportunities here, which might not seem like a lot, but keep in mind Gulf Breeze is a very small population. So it's not a huge city. So you're not going to get thousands upon thousands of options. Now, if we were to take brand new construction out of it, there are over 50 options in this small footprint to get exactly what they wanted of that 400K, minimum of 3 beds, all of that great stuff that they wanted. Taking them out of the equation and putting you into the equation, maybe your budget's a little bit different. So let's talk about real estate prices as a whole. First and foremost, Gulf Breeze has every option you can probably think of outside of high rises. If you want a high rise, we don't really have it out here. We do have condos that are kind of high rise. You're generally going to have to go into Pensacola proper for that or get to Pensacola Beach. Gulf Breeze doesn't really have high rises, but we do have waterfront. And within waterfront, we have sound front, Gulf front, canal front, lake front, creek front, water fountain front. I don't know. If you want water around you, Gulf Breeze is a great spot because it's surrounded by water on the north and the south side. And then, of course, how they built Gulf Breeze in general was they built a lot of canals. In fact, out of all of the areas that along the Emerald Coast that we touch, Gulf Breeze has the highest amount of canals that I am aware of. They're just everywhere, scattered throughout a ton of different neighborhoods. The developers out there, they dredged them out. So you've got a lot of options for them to make more money to sell a waterfront house, but also so that people can enjoy them, have their boats, up on their dock and not just getting constantly thrashed by the waves. And it really protects the integrity of the dock as well. But they also have single family homes and condos and gated communities, non-gated communities, Gulf communities. I mean, the list is long on the different types of options, which is super good for a population this small to have that many different options. So if this is something that interests you, but maybe you've got a little bit more specific taste that you want or a specific type of property, I bet Gulf Breeze has you covered. And the best part about this, not near as expensive as most people think. The median home sold price in 2024 was $391,000 in December. Now, of course, that fluctuates. In November, it might have been a little bit more or less. But the bottom line here is it hovers underneath $400,000 as of the time that I'm shooting this video. And you can get into properties even earlier than that. If we take out mobile homes, manufactured homes, things like that, the houses are starting under $300,000. And when I say under $300,000, I mean a lot under $300,000. You can start getting 3-bedroom homes in Gulf Breeze area for under $220,000. Condos will be approximately the same. You'll start getting entry-level condos in about $220,000, $225,000. Of course, this just depends on what's on the market at this time. That could fluctuate as well. And then, of course, there's everything in between that $220,000 number all the way up to $4.5 million. And that's just on active properties as of this morning. So, of course, that could waver as well. There could be more expensive properties that come on or less expensive. And that one at $4.5 million is gorgeous. It's brand new construction, multiple stories, great dock, 5 beds, over 5,000 square feet, right on the water. The bottom line here is there are so many options out here. It's just a matter of what you're looking for. Now, let's go on to taxes and insurance because that's going to be part of the whole real estate equation in and of itself. Now, when we're looking at an average priced home at around that $390,000 to $400,000, you can expect your taxes to hover somewhere between $2,500 and $3,000 per year, usually. I say usually because we have a thing called homestead here in the state of Florida, where if somebody homesteaded the property a long time ago, meaning it is their primary residence, they do live here, they are Florida residents, they get a tax break on how much they pay, and then they also get a reduction in how much it could be raised. So if it was homesteaded a long time ago, their taxes can be a lot lower. So that's why the range is kind of wide, $2,500 to $3,000. And then with insurance is going to vary widely depending on what type of property you get and if you're in a flood flood zone or not, but standard wind coverage on a $400,000 home, you can expect it to be around $2,500 per year. Of course, that will go lower if you are in a newer construction or a stronger built home, and it can go higher if you're in an older house with like maybe old windows and old roof, things like that. There's a lot of factors that come in play here. So I would generally estimate somewhere between about $2,200 and about $2,800 for an average priced home here in Gulf Breeze. Now, if you have to get flood insurance, that can vary as well. If you're right on the water, obviously that's going to go higher, but you're also buying at this point a $1, $2, $3 million home or more. And then if you are in another flood zone that's maybe not on the water, it's going to depend on what flood zone that is. Now, if you are in flood zone X, then that insurance is going to be a lot lower. You can get it if you'd like to protect your asset. It's about $350 to $400 per year. And most of Gulf Breeze is in zone X. Actually, I'm going to throw up a picture either over my face or up here in the corner showing the different zones. As you can see, most of Gulf Breeze is in zone X, which we'll talk about why here in just a few minutes. So out of this entire area, which again is not that heavily populated, there were 400 homes sold last year. It was actually like 396 or something like that. So I'm curious if you think you're going to be one of those next 400 or 500 in 2025. By the way, we are real estate agents first. I run a full real estate team. I've got an expert in every single city from Pensacola to Panama City Beach to help you out. So if you've heard something here today, or maybe you have some additional questions we didn't answer, you'd like to go over those, all of my contact information will pop up on the screen. You can call, text, or email me. Please try to use the ones that's right here. A lot of people look me up privately and send me a message, and sometimes those go into spam and things like that, and I don't want to miss any of your questions. Of course, if it's something really quick and easy and you're not ready to have that conversation yet, you can always comment it down below and I will get to it personally. Okay, one of the things that wasn't on my clients list that was going from Atlanta to here, but I think is super important, that's cost of living and utilities and things like that. But basically kind of getting a whole view on what it's going to cost to live here, because although housing prices are the largest proponent of cost of living, it's not the only one. And you could look at the prices and be like, oh, cool, that's what they are here. Maybe it makes sense over there, but maybe you're in an area where the other cost of living stuff is a lot cheaper, and that may affect your decision a little bit. So there's no like super detailed way I could explain this without dragging on a video for an hour of just talking about cost of living. So I'm going to go through some of the main points and then kind of adjust it for national averages so that you can get an idea of what cost of living looks out here. So since we already talked about buying a home, let's talk about renting. The median rental price in Gulf Breeze is somewhere between $2,150 and $2,350. They generally list at about $2,350. The average is about $2,150. And this is using only data from the real estate multiple listing service that, super secret little access all of us realtors have to everything. So this isn't going to include private owners that are renting by owner. So that number could be higher or lower if you look at it as a whole. One of the worst things about doing the research on this stuff is if you look at some of these websites, they're going to have some pretty outlandish rental rates. I was just looking in preparation for this video, and one of them said the average rent was $1,150 in the area. I can promise you that is not the case. In fact, if you can find anything for $1,150 a month that isn't just a room and that you're sharing with somebody else in their own home, I would be really surprised. So I would expect at least $2,000 a month in most cases. You'll find a few less than that, and you'll find a whole lot more above that as well. And just to put it in perspective, this is for 3-bedroom, 2 baths. This is generally what you're going to get at about that $2,000 or more mark. All right, now I'm going to read off a couple of stats from payscale.com. The overall cost of living is 13% lower than the national average here. So that's overall. If we just look at wherever you're at, it's 13% lower. So if you were looking, let's say in Atlanta, which I'm very confident is probably a lot higher than the national average. I did not look that up, so don't shoot me if I'm wrong here. But I imagine it's a lot higher. And if you looked at that and it's like, hey, it's 25% higher here and 13% lower here, you can kind of do a little bit of that math, and your life is going to get 30-something percent, 38% better essentially. And I'm putting those in quotations because I'm sure that's not how it actually works. Now, the housing is the biggest differentiator. The housing costs here are 25% 25% less than the national average. I know some of you will be watching from very rural parts of the country and you'll be like, what are you talking about? 390 is insanely high. I understand. We're just doing this to national average. So it is 25% lower there. One of the things that surprised me, kind of, is that our utilities were actually 11% higher than the national average. And I say it just kind of surprised me because it is hot here. And so our ACs are just cranking a good 10 months out of the year, or probably realistically like 7 months out of the year. We do have a couple of months of very, very good temperature, things like that. I'm not going to go into that too much because we are going to talk about the weather here in just a bit. And then groceries are about 14% less on the national average. And I wanted to break down some of the average costs of some kind of random things just to give you an idea. Electricity is averaging about $220 a month, according to the same site. Although I'm going to be honest, that felt a little bit low. Mine are lower than that, but I'm a single person living in a 3-2, 16 or no, maybe 1,800 or 2,000 square foot home. I do have a pool that has, equipment and stuff like that makes my electricity a little bit higher, but even my electricity hovers around 150 to 175. And then my water is generally about $20 to $40 a month. If I'm filling up my pool or I'm doing a lot with the water, it does jump up and, it has gone up to about $80 before. Then I also have gas at my house. So that lowers my heating bill. But the gas is negligible. I mean, it's literally like $20-25 a month. And then gas around here is all over the place, but just to put it in perspective, yesterday I filled up for $2.90 a gallon. Now this was in Navarre, not technically Gulf Breeze, but the prices are the exact same for both of those two. It's not any different to ship from, to ship to Navarre versus Gulf Breeze. And this is without any like codes or coupons or anything like that. This is straight up pulling up, sticking my card in, filling up. And then according to the same site, healthcare was about 14% cheaper. I'm going to go through these and I have absolutely no idea if these are correct. This is purely from the website that we discussed earlier. They were kind of breaking down some of the doctor visits and things. They said, the doctor visits are about $120 a visit, $100 for a dental visit, prescription drugs hovering around $200, and then the vet around $60. Now I can confirm the vet, because I take my pup to the vet, and that is exactly what it costs. It cost me $60 to get there. Maybe we do shots or something like that. Might be a little bit more. But that one does seem to be accurate. The other ones I cannot attest to because I'm covered by the VA, so I don't generally have any of those expenses. All right, that was a lot with cost of living. I hope I didn't lose you guys there. We've got two more things to discuss. You don't want to miss the last one because it's the one we get asked the absolute most on, so I try to hit it in as many videos as I can. But for number 7 on our list, it is outdoor lifestyle. We've got it out here in droves. It is Florida. After all, it's one of the big reasons why people move out here. And although it wasn't important to our family moving from Atlanta, it is important to a lot of you watching, so let's discuss it. So we have just about anything you can think of: hiking and kayaking and camping and stand-up paddleboard and boating and fishing, and the list goes on and on. Hiking, biking, mountain biking, mountain biking. Okay, it's not mountain biking. We do have trails you can bike on that have a little bit of elevation, but if you're looking for big mountains and things like that, you're in the wrong spot because the elevation here in Gulf Breeze is not that high. We've got great parks. One of the biggest one is the Shoreline National Park. It's got this big old long dock and a lot of great things in that area as well. And then for you nature lovers, we have the Gulf Islands National Seashore Preserve area of Gulf Breeze. And this thing is immense. There's a lot of things going on in there. So if you're looking for some hiking, some trails, some running trails, any of that stuff, they've got it. And then, of course, we're right here on the Gulf. So as I mentioned with fishing, lots of fishing, lots and lots and lots of fishing. In fact, it's so cool because you're actually watching the fleet leave in the morning. If you want to go watch them leave, I guess you can do that. They leave at all different times. And then they're coming back with fresh fish and they're dropping them off in the hands of the restaurants in the area. So you're getting straight to ocean, straight to the table food. So you've heard farm to table food. This is water to table food, and it's one of my favorite things about this entire area. I'm going to be honest. When I first moved here, I didn't touch seafood at all. It just wasn't really that big. Maybe I'd get salmon once in a while. That was about the extent of my fanciness. Oh, and sushi. I've always kind of liked sushi. And then one time, or many, many times, I tried some of this fresh fish that was coming in. And I finally got hooked one time. I went to a place in Fort Walton Beach called Anglers. And I'd been trying grouper and tuna, different types of tuna. And just none of them were really fitting. And then I got the redfish at the suggestion of my waitress there. And I have been a believer ever since. Redfish is my personal favorite. It's very easy to eat. It's great with some Creole sauce on top. It's absolutely amazing. But you're getting all of that here in the Gulf Breeze area as well. They're bringing the freshest fish right there to the restaurants so that you can enjoy that. And, you know, fish is just super healthy and it's delicious. But my point of that is you can do all of those things as well. You can charter boats. You can get your own boat. You can, you know, what have you. You can fish in the Sound. You can fish in, you know, the bay. You can fish in the actual Gulf of Mexico. And there's different types of fish in every single one of those, different sizes, different, you know, just all of it. You know, I'm not super into the different types of fishing, and I couldn't tell you the types of fish that you can get out there. I just know it's extremely popular out here. A lot of people do it, and there's a lot of services around that also. And then, of course, there's the beach. The beach, the thing that we are the most famous for here on the Emerald Coast. We have that beautiful white sand, which is just from hundreds of thousands of years, from the Appalachian Mountains, hundreds of thousands of years of crushed graphite over and over that eventually the tide brings in. That's what makes it super soft and white, and probably why it's also illegal to take our sand from our beaches. I'm sure that also has some environmental effects, but the beach is one of the biggest things. And then, of course, you've got that water, that crystal, you know, kind of emerald green water or crystal blue water, depending on what type of year, what type of, heat there is out there, you know, the sun beaming down, all of that. The picturesque area of the beach in general is why so many people like us. And you're surrounded by it in Gulf Breeze. The entire southern portion of Gulf Breeze is beach. I mean, you do have to go into Pensacola Beach. So I guess it's technically Pensacola Beach, which I never quite understood because it's like Pensacola, Gulf Breeze, Pensacola Beach. You have to go through one city to get to it, but I guess Pensacola claimed it. I'm not going to knock it. The fact is you've got it there. And then you've got the entire boardwalk down there at Pensacola Beach also. And you've got the entire drive of that national seashore area with a ton of little tiny private beaches, something we don't talk a lot about on this channel, but we probably should. If you want an entire beach to yourself, if you drive along that route, you can eventually find one with no car, take your stuff, go out there. You won't even see anybody. You'll probably see somebody way off in the distance, but for the most part, you're going to have that entire beach to yourself. All right, let's get on to our last thing, and the thing that we get asked the absolute most on in this area, and it has been happening less. So I think by us saying it in these videos so often, I think that's helping us not get as many questions. So this is why I like to provide this. And we're going to kind of break this down into two separate little things, and that is the weather and then hurricanes. We got to talk about hurricanes. That's the one that we get asked a lot about. And to be completely honest, for most of us Floridians, if it wasn't for this YouTube channel or wasn't for our job in helping people move here, I'd probably never even think about it again other than when it's happening or when might be hitting us. Because we just don't think about it. We get hit so rarely, knock on wood. I don't want to get hit this year because I said that, but we get hit so rarely. And when we do, so much of the time, it's just a storm, you know? And yes, I'm not downplaying the amount of damage that a hurricane can do. I just think most people see that on the news and they see somewhere in Florida gets hit almost every single year, and it does cause a lot of damage. But, you know, it's not every area and it's not all the time. And a lot of times when we do get hit, it doesn't do all that much, especially if it's just a tropical storm or a Cat 1 or Cat 2. Sure, it'll cause some damage. Sure, some people are displaced. But for the most part, it's just part of our daily life here. But let's dive into it a little bit further. All right, first off, let's talk about weather. We've got very mild winters here. We're in the middle of winter right now. I'm shooting this mid-January, and it's so cold. It's so cold. I don't like it. It's cold to me. Okay, the other day, I took a screenshot, sent it to my folks, because my sister used to live here, so it's always kind of nice to kind of like remind her. She's up in Washington now, where it snows. I took a screenshot, 37 degrees. And I know for some of you, you're like, yeah, that's like a normal November night or October morning or whatever. No, to us, this is like shut down the world. In fact, I just heard that next week, apparently, it's going to snow. And it hasn't snowed here since like 2015, 2016. And it never stuck. You just saw little tiny flakes, and it wasn't for very long, but it did. And where they're talking about doing that again next week, like Tuesday or Wednesday, something like that. I'm not messing around with you. they're shutting this place down. The schools are closed Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Monday happens to be Martin Luther King Day. So, this is like January 20th or something, I think, as I'm shooting this. And they're going to close it down Tuesday and Wednesday because there might be snow, which is very warranted, mind you, because us Floridians do not know how to drive and things get icy, especially on the bridge. The bridge gets icy because it's out there. It's got the breeze going and it's not healthy. So it's a very good thing that they're doing it. But it is comical to so many people, particularly in northern states, that move down here. They're like, what do you mean you guys are going to shut down because a little bit of ice is going to be out there? Just learn to drive. We don't know how. Okay. We know how to drive when it's really hot. If you want somebody that can drive when the rubber is melting on your car as you're driving, you want a Floridian. You do not want one driving in just a little bit of ice. We don't know what we're doing. But for the most part, it's very mild winters. Generally, we'll have a couple of weeks where we're in the high 30s, low 40s, mid 40s, something like that. Generally for 2 to 3 weeks at most in January, maybe a little bit at the end of December. But like December was warm for us. It was nice. It was 55 and up, 55 to 70 most of the time. I think we had a couple of cold fronts come in, but that was it. We even had a warm front come in where I was out in shorts again in like December 16th or so. I don't remember what day it was. But the winters are very mild here. Part of the reason why so many people come down here, and also part of the reason why a lot of snowbirds come down here. And for those that don't know, snowbirds are people that, escape their northern freezing climate and come down here, to where humans should live when it gets cold. All right. We also have hot summers. Very hot summers, brutally hot summers sometimes. And when you look at it on paper, you're like, oh, it's generally only like 90 to 95 degrees. It didn't seem that hot. It's hot because of the humidity. The humidity is so much, and it makes everything feel so much warmer. So it's like, it's 92, but feels like 1004 or whatever. It's not that high, obviously, but it does feel pretty warm. I personally love that. But if you're somebody that maybe is going to be working outside, it's going to be a little bit more brutal. If you're working roofs or whatever, I remember when I was younger, I did a lot of roofs out in New Mexico and stuff, and it was brutally hot there too. I could not imagine doing that out here. It'd be a lot. If you're working in an office setting, maybe you're working from home, retired, something like that, most of us are going to use pools and the beach to kind of cool down. And then, of course, we've got that Gulf breeze coming in, which is... the whole video's on Gulf breeze, which is kind of funny. But no, I actually mean a breeze from the Gulf to come in and calm us down or cool us down. And then, of course, you've got, just get to your car, turn on the air conditioning. You'll be good. Get out of your air conditioning, go inside the store, go inside your office where there's more air conditioning. You're good. That's sort of how we live out here. So for the most part, the temperature about 7, 8, 9 months out of the year, it's going to be somewhere between the 50s and the 70s for a good portion of it. So it's very, very good. But then during the summer months, it's obviously going to be higher than that, in the 80s and 90s. And then, as I mentioned, in the winter months, it can be, in the mid to high 30s, sometimes occasionally dipping a little bit beneath that. Okay, now let's get to the part that a lot of you are probably thinking, if maybe this is one of your first times watching me, which, by the way, thank you if you're a returning viewer and you've made it this far. Awesome, thank you too. I know you've probably heard some of this stuff before, but I try to say it in a little different way each time so that maybe you'll pick up on something else when I try to add things. So let's get to hurricane season. Hurricane season here is from June to November, with the highest probability of us getting hit with hurricanes or storms in general between August and October. Those are kind of the bigger months there. And although we don't get hit every single year, as I mentioned before, in fact, we've only gotten hit really big 2 different times in our area, other than Hurricane Michael, which is in Panama City Beach. It didn't hit the whole Emerald Coast. It was just Panama City Beach that had most of the destruction. That was just 4, 5, 6 years ago, 2019, if I remember correctly. I might be off on that by a year or two, but they did get hit pretty good. Before that, it was 2005. Before that, it was like 1987, 86, something like that, as far as actual direct hits to the Emerald Coast that caused immense damage. We've had lots of hurricanes, lots of tropical storms since then, but for the most part, our infrastructure is built in a way where it's not going to do a whole lot of damage. My current home that I'm in has been around since the 80s, and I'm a stone's throw from the water. If I was a better thrower, I could probably hit the sound from where I'm at. That's how close it is. So just because we don't get hit every year doesn't mean you shouldn't be prepared. So I'll give you a couple of very quick tips. And then if I remember, I will put a hurricane preparedness guide in the description down below. Excuse me, if you hit the little more button on YouTube, depending if you're watching on TV Or if you're watching in your computer tablet, you've got a little description down there. You can click on that. It'll take you to our guide. Or, of course, you can email us. I'll throw up my email super quick, all of my contact information again. If you'd like that hurricane preparedness guide because you already live here, or maybe you're going to be moving here soon, you want that, just reach out to me and we'll get it. Make sure you've got supplies. You want supplies. You want an emergency kit ready that's got lots of water, non-perishable food, flashlights, extra batteries. Make sure the batteries are good and charged. First aid kits, and then chargers for those so that if something is coming in, you can charge everything. That's how I like to do it. I do carry extra batteries and stuff at home too, but for a lot of this stuff, I have like my flashlights and things like that. They're chargeable. So this way, when a storm's come in, I just start plugging in everything in those extra little battery power packs to keep my phone going and things. And I've got them all scattered. People give them to us all the time as real estate agents when we go, to conferences and stuff. They give us these little battery packs. So I must have 20 of them floating around the house. So I just charge as many of them as possible. Fill up your tubs with water as well, so you've got a backup source also. And then, of course, if you have any home protection for your house, like home shutters or impact-resistant windows, definitely consider those. Make sure your roof is good. So if you're starting to notice, a lot of leaks and stuff happening in a roof, it might be a good time to update that before a hurricane comes in. Like not directly before, like, hey, hurricane's coming, call the roofing company. That might not be the best idea. But before it becomes an issue, because you definitely don't want your roof blowing off mid-hurricane. That would be an absolutely terrible, terrible day. And then the last thing that I want to touch on this is the evacuation zones. This is something I hadn't talked about in the past, but we're trying to put in more videos to get you guys to understand that we do have evacuation zones. In fact, I'm going to throw up a picture again, either up here or over my face as I'm talking, full screen, whatever. Talking about the evacuation zone. So they go from A to F. There's a couple other ones in there if you look at this picture as well. And then it also gives you an evacuation route, which is pretty obvious. There's only one way in and out of Gulf Breeze, and that's with Highway 98. So they're suggesting you go through Pensacola, but you've also got the option to go through the toll bridge. The big thing here is just make sure that you're evacuating when your zone is called. As you can see, the closer you are to the Gulf of Mexico, the higher or the faster you're going to have to leave. So if you're in a condo, on the first floor or something right on the beach, you're the first one that's got to go. So as soon as you hear Zone A's got to leave, which I believe in Gulf Breeze is a tropical storm, they're generally suggesting you leave at that point. Just go ahead and get out of town. Just budget for it, plan for it. It's going to happen at some point in your life. Where I live, I think it's like a C or a D, and I don't have to leave till it's like a category 4. And I say have to leave, like they don't generally mandate it. Nobody's going around checking unless like you're in zone A and it's a cat 5, like they will go door to door sometimes to kind of make sure everybody's out in case somebody got stuck or somebody didn't get the word. They don't want that to happen. But try to leave whenever your zone is called. As things are progressing. And there's a lot of time that happens before it. Like it'll be like a day and a half before it hits that the A's are leaving. And then like 5 or 6 hours later, the B's. And then like a few hours later, the C's. So you're not getting this mass rush out of town. That's why they've got it structured that way, and to also protect you based on the zone that you're in and the probability that it will cause a lot of damage. And it will flex. Sometimes you will leave town. Like one year I left for what we thought, Hurricane Michael, for instance. I actually stayed for Michael, but it was the one right before that we thought was going to hit us, and I ended up leaving town, and it like got nowhere near. I mean, it went way off, and I was like, oh, cool, nice little vacation to Biloxi. Like, I'm gonna go gamble. So it was kind of fun there, but I know that's a financial burden to a lot of people, so it's something to definitely think about. Just watch it and be careful. It's not worth sticking around here if you're not 100% sure how your house will uphold in the storm. You don't want to be caught in a bad position, because by the time the hurricane hits, it's too late. You're going to have to write it out one way or the other. Now, I want to skip over to something that is kind of beneficial and unique to Gulf Breeze, and that is their elevation. So Gulf Breeze has an average elevation of 16 feet and 4 inches, which I know sounds very, very low and close to the water. And that's 16.4 above sea level, of course. And so it ranges anywhere from minus 43 feet to plus 24 feet. But where this is very beneficial is because most of the Emerald Coast is about 10 to 11 feet. If you're looking at the actual border, coastal towns. Of course, you get up into Crestview, and that's like the highest elevation in the state, so it is a little bit different there. But why this is important is because Gulf Breeze is typically higher elevated than everything else, which is why the flood zones, we're going to put that back up again, why the flood zones are where they are, and why so much of it is in flood zone X. As you can see here, all of that green area, I think it's green, I don't have it in front of me, All of that is flood zone X, meaning you do not need flood insurance on that. Of course, as I mentioned, if you want to keep that on your house, it's somewhere between $350 and $400 per year in most of those areas, unless you have a big extravagant house, maybe on the Sound or something. They might go a little bit higher there. But it is because of the elevation that is so good. And this is very beneficial for hurricanes and for rising waters and floods because you've got that higher elevation. So just wanted to give you guys a little peace of mind there. So I know this was a longer video. I wanted to get as robust as I could and really dive into each of these 8 topics. And hopefully the story of our actual clients that were moving from Atlanta down here helped, because this is the kind of stuff we're helping you guys with every single day. I mean, we are getting calls, texts, and emails all the time from y'all. We really appreciate it. So even if you are a year out and you're like, hey, it might be too early to call them, it is never too early to start building a relationship with us. Whether it's me, whether it's one of my seasoned professionals, whatever, depending on where you want to be, it's always good to start making that relationship. We can start sending you properties so that you get an idea, even if they'll all be gone by the time you're buying. It gives you an idea of where the market is going and what you can afford, and what you want to afford, I guess, is even better, because you don't need to go all the way to your budget. But building that relationship is beneficial. It just helps with everything, and then we can always answer those questions that maybe we don't get to answer on these videos, because we can't get to everything because the Emerald Coast is so vast. There's so much going on. So I appreciate y'all watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.